She didn't pull a knife, she didn't shout, she didn't even stand up at first. She just held her ground over a black carry-on bag, and somehow that was enough to light the fuse on a 5-hour bomb. You know what I mean? Because when a person with a tiny sliver of authority decides today's the day, she makes an example of someone quiet. It turns a routine boarding line into a courtroom, a circus, and a lesson all at once. The flight attendant's name was Brenda Jenkins. The passenger was Isabella Sterling. And the only thing louder than the jet engines that day was the sound of pride colliding with power. Yeah, that happened. JFK was doing what JFK always does, swallowing people whole and spitting them toward gates and bad coffee. Parents juggling strollers, consultants pacing with headsets. College kids in headphones drifting like they'd never heard of schedules. Isabella blended in by design. Cream sweater, gray trousers, flats built for distance. Hair twisted back like she'd rather be invisible than important, tablet in one hand. That sleek black carry-on at her feet, the kind of bag that looked like nothing and everything. Understated. Anonymous. The way expensive things sometimes are when the owner has nothing to prove. Boarding for Transcontinental 782 trickled forward, group by group. And Brenda posted up at the jet bridge like a bouncer who'd been told the club was over capacity. The first warning sign wasn't the sizer. It was the expression. That tight little smile people wear when they're bracing for an argument they haven't earned, scanning for a rule to enforce even if they have to invent the rule on the spot. A kid with a swollen backpack got pulled. Brenda found her win. The bag didn't fit. $50 please. Next. And you could feel her shoulders drop into that rhythm. Like, there it is. That's my power today. Isabella waited. Group 2 on the boarding pass, but no need to squeeze in early. And when she finally stepped forward with Group 4, Brenda's gaze locked onto the black bag the way a cat locks onto a lasered. Not because it's a threat, because it's a challenge. Ma'am, the sizer. And Isabella gave the diplomatic smile people give when they know the answer already. Slides the bag in. Inches to spare. No drama. But now Brenda's painted into her own corner, so she pivots. Your tablet counts as a personal item. You can't also have a purse, except there is no purse. And you could hear something delicate snap in the air, not the rule, the patience. Let me back up a sec. Isabella could have said, because the truth is she had 5 hours ahead, a cross-country deck of meetings that would steer a project worth more than small countries. And held up one item, and waited. She walked on. She thought it was over. It never is, not when someone has decided your face is their mountain to die on. In row 7, window seat 7A. Premium economy for a little elbow room. The bag went overhead, settled neat between a duffel and a roller, the cabin filling with that choreography of elbows and apologies. And Isabella turned to her tablet like a person who believed she'd earned a little quiet. Then came the shadow. Brenda again, arms crossed. Voice pitched not for conversation, but for audience. The bin is full. The bag is questionable. We need you to check it. And that word questionable hung in the air like a gnat you can't swat. Checking wasn't an option. Not because lost luggage is a pain, because of what lived inside the foam in that bag, a one-of-one object that didn't belong in a cargo hold or a viral video. Isabella said no, flat and even. The kind of no people mistake for softness because it doesn't audition for the room. Brenda dialed it up, a threat wrapped in policy, captain, security, problems waiting at the gate on arrival. And an aisle seat lawyer, David Chun, started watching the way lawyers do, eyes taking notes, mind building timelines. An older woman across the aisle pressed a hand to her throat. It wasn't about space anymore. It was about winning, and Brenda wanted the trophy of a forced capitulation. Isabella looked up, finally, and the temperature dropped the way it drops before a summer storm, quiet first, then charged. "You're harassing me," she said, not loud, not angry, just precise, listing the inventions, the intimidation, the baseless threats, and then she put it on the table. "If you touch my property, if you keep it this, you won't be explaining yourself to the captain. You'll be explaining yourself to the CEO." For a heartbeat, Brenda blinked, because certainty met a wall and cracked. But ego is a stubborn thing, so she demanded the bag be opened, right there. Aisle justice. And you could feel the plane lean toward the moment. Isabella gave her one last exit. "Are you sure? There's no coming back from this." And when the answer came, she unzipped. No trail mix, no sweaters, no paperback, Just a device the size of a hardback book, titanium and matte ceramic. No ports, no buttons. Minimalism so pure it read as alien. And if Brenda felt cheated, what, a laptop? David Chun did not, because he'd seen sketches, whispers, the mythology of a company that didn't advertise, didn't sell, didn't ask, it chose. Isabella tilted the device, and there it was, laser-etched, a perfect circle with a single wave through its heart, the symbol that meant more in certain rooms than Apple icons ever could. Oh my God, he breathed, that's an aura. And you could feel the word ripple, a tech guy behind them craning for a look, a hush rolling up the aisle. Aura, Isabella said, and her voice carried like a bell. Is my company. The effect on Brenda was physical, a visible stagger, the drinks cart kissing her hip, the smirk leaving her face like steam. Isabella shut the zipper with the kind of finality people write into court transcripts, and she spoke to the crew behind Brenda. Not unkind, not cruel, just in command. The captain's cleared. Prepare the cabin. Let's go. And they did. The plane lifted. Everyone sat with what they'd seen, and 5 hours stretched ahead like a sentence handed down by gravity. Brenda performed the motions the way your hands remember old songs. Coffee poured, safety demo delivered, chin held steady by will alone. Was more unnerving than a speech. You don't know who you're talking to. It's cliché until it isn't. At SFO, Brenda's phone buzzed with the kind of text that empties your stomach. Report immediately. The one with lawyers and contracts and numbers that have their own weather systems. One call. Arthur, she said, and Arthur Vance, who'd stared down people who move markets, went very, very still when he heard what had happened, because there are breaches and there are breaches. And forcing the reveal of the Helios prototype in an aisle between 7A and 7C isn't a customer service oops. It's a security incident with a capital S. He asked what she wanted. Because that was always the question with Isabella, and she didn't breathe fire. She measured consequence. Suspend the corporate account. Call Robert Maxwell at the parent company. Require a real apology, not PR fog. Overhaul training top to bottom. De-escalation, implicit bias, service-based authority, not dictatorship in Navy polyester. And yes, Aura will consult. Because if you want it done right, build it yourself. In Phoenix, Maxwell took the call and lost his color. Because the number Arthur named was 700 million and the passenger's name was Isabella Sterling. And when Arthur said Helios out loud, the phone might as well have fallen through the floor. He asked what to do, and the answer came like a recipe you don't want but know you need. Accept every term. Show your work publicly. Build something new from the rubble. Meanwhile, in a fluorescent office at SFO, Brenda read a report with her name on it and the words she didn't know how to process. CEO, Aura, prototype, witness statements. And she said the line people say when the story catches up to them. I was just doing my job. And the supervisor who'd known her forever shook his head because the words didn't fit anymore. Here's the twist no one planned for. The thing about stories is they keep going after the video ends. David Chun wrote up what he'd seen. Not a rant, an analysis. Inside his firm's internal blog. A neat dissection of risk and exposure and the soft tissue of corporate culture that tears under pressure. Somebody leaked it, as somebody always does, and it went everywhere. Headlines built for outrage, clips from 3 angles, the internet doing its favorite thing, turning a person into a symbol overnight. Brenda became the villain people needed that week. The airline Karen, and a clumsy TV interview made it worse, because shifting blame reads as cowardice when the tape is already out. 2 weeks later, the investigation ended where everyone knew it would, and a 25-year career dissolved into an HR form. If this were revenge, the story would end there. But Isabella never played revenge, she played systems. Maxwell flew west, walked into a windowed room in the Presidio where the bridge looks like a painting. Apologized like a man who finally read the fine print on his own culture, and Isabella didn't twist the knife, she handed him tools. Build the training with us. Seed the professionalism project with 20 million scholarships and vocational programs for the people who carry your brand on their shoulders. Announce it publicly, not by throwing one employee under a bus, but by owning leadership failure and naming the fix. He agreed, because he had no choice, and also because, somewhere beneath the fear, he knew it was the only good road left. Weeks turned the narrative, as weeks do, away from outrage and toward outcome. Complaints against cabin crews dropped, morale ticked up. The share price found its feet, and people who'd never heard of Aura learned about a CEO who didn't grandstand, didn't tweet, just rebuilt a standard in the space where a conflict had cracked it. Brenda disappeared into Ohio, hair softer, lipstick gone, apron on, navigating lunch rushes with a kind of humility she'd never met when she wore wings on her lapel. Swallowing little insults because you can, because the soup needs to be hot and not everything is a battlefield. It wasn't justice, not exactly. It wasn't tragedy either. It was the slow lesson that authority without grace is just noise. 6 months later, 35,000 feet over a quilt of clouds. Isabella sat again in 7A, and a young attendant stopped with water and a smile that was warm without trying too hard. "We just finished the new training," she said, earnest and proud. "It's all about seeing people, not just rules." And Isabella felt that quiet satisfaction that never shows up in press releases, the one moment that tells you it's stuck. She flipped through the in-flight magazine and found David Chen's face in a profile about rising tech law voices, his analysis from row 7 now a calling card. And she set the magazine down and looked out the window, letting the hum of the engines level her thoughts. The world runs on tiny choices, she knew that, a finger pointing at a sizer. A zipper pulled halfway, a decision to say no without drama, a call placed in a terminal, and every so often those tiny choices rewire a system. So what do you do with a story like this? Where a carry-on bag turns into a corporate reckoning, where a woman who prefers to be invisible steps forward just long enough to insist on respect, and then steps back, letting the fix speak for itself, where another woman learns, brutally, that a uniform isn't a crown, it's a responsibility you have to earn over and over again. Maybe you cheer the ending, the better training, the calmer flights, the quiet wins. Maybe you flinch at the cost. That last scene, if you want it, is simple and cinematic. The seatbelt sign dings off, the aisle fills, Isabella waits, unhurried, water cup empty, the bag secure overhead, a small nod to the attendant who met the moment with grace. And the camera backs through the cabin toward the door, the engine noise rising, the frame widening to clouds and sun, and a silver fuselage stitching coasts together. Then it holds there, open, unresolved, because that question is yours. Was Isabella's response justice or a hammer too heavy for the nail? Did the system correct itself, or did it crush a person on the way to fixing a culture? You tell me. Drop your take in the comments. Right? Wrong? Somewhere in the messy middle. And if stories like this keep you thinking about power, policy, and the people who get squeezed between them, hit like so more folks find it, subscribe for the next one, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming.